Hello everyone. Before we start, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you. That's how YouTube keeps sending you stories like this. And now, let's get into it. I had parked on the shoulder, just past the end of an exit ramp a little after 3 in the morning. It was one of those spots every trucker knows but never admits to using. No rest area for miles, logbook tight, eyes heavy, body humming from hours of vibration. The ramp curved away from the interstate and dropped into farmland. Cornfields on both sides, cut low after harvest, rows of stalks shaved down to stubble. The air smelled like cold dirt and diesel. The moon was full and high, bright enough to flatten shadows and make everything look sharp and exposed. I shut the engine down and let the silence settle. The highway noise never stops, but at that hour it comes in waves. A semi every now and then, a car maybe once every 10 minutes. Between those sounds it felt empty. Too empty. I pulled the curtains most of the way but left a gap. I liked seeing the moon. It kept me awake long enough to get settled. That was when I noticed the figure. It stood in the field on the passenger side, maybe 60 or 70 yards out, just past the ditch. Upright. Human-shaped. Arms slightly out from the sides. Dark against the pale ground. It didn't move. At first I barely registered it. My brain filled in the answer before the question finished forming. A scarecrow. Old farmer. Grandkids, end of story. The longer I looked, the more it felt off. The proportions looked right, but the posture was wrong. Too straight. Too clean. No sag. No slump. Still it stayed in one place, and the moonlight can play tricks. I turned away and climbed into the bunk. I put on a video, volume low, screen dimmed. Just something to keep my mind from running. The cab felt tight. Like it always does when you stop somewhere you shouldn't. The metal popped as it cooled. Wind slid under the trailer and hummed through the landing gear. Every now and then headlights would sweep across the mirrors and vanish. Out of the corner of my eye I caught movement. Not fast. Not sudden. Just enough to register as change. I paused the video and looked toward the passenger window. The figure was still there. Same shape. Same height. But I wasn't sure it was in the same spot. I stared longer this time. I tried to lock its position against the rows of cut corn behind it, counted the gaps, lined it up with a fence post farther back. It felt closer. Not much, just enough to make my chest tighten. I told myself it was nothing. Perspective, fatigue, the moon shifting. I shut off the video and killed the interior lights. The cab went dark, glass turning into a mirror. I leaned forward so my reflection faded and watched. The field stayed still. No wind, no animals. The figure didn't move. That almost made it worse. I checked the time. Still early. Plenty of drive time left if I wanted to leave. But my body was already sliding into rest mode. The ramp felt isolated, but it also felt temporary. I told myself I would close my eyes for a bit and reassess. Then my bladder made the decision for me. I tried to ignore it. Shifted positions. Thought about the bottle under the bunk. I hated using it. Always felt sloppy. I told myself I was being stupid. A grown man afraid of a scarecrow. I glanced again toward the window. The figure stood where I expected it to be. That settled it. I grabbed my jacket, slid into my boots, and cracked the door. Cold air poured in. The smell of soil and exhaust hit me hard. I stepped down and closed the door quietly, like noise mattered. The ground felt uneven under my boots. Gravel, dirt, bits of dried corn. The moon made everything bright but flat, like a photograph. I walked between the tractor and the trailer, keeping close to the metal, using it as cover without admitting that to myself. I stopped near the tandems and unzipped. The sound felt loud in the quiet. My back was to the field, and every nerve in my body wanted me to turn around. I focused on the task, on the relief, on the fact that this was normal and harmless. Halfway through, I couldn't take it anymore. I turned my head. The field was empty. The spot where the figure had been was bare. Just rows of cut stalks and a darker strip where the ditch ran. No shape, no shadow. Nothing upright at all. My stomach dropped hard, like missing a step on stairs. My hands went numb. I cut myself off midstream and fumbled with my zipper, fingers clumsy and shaking. I didn't look again. I didn't wait. I bolted back to the cab, boots slipping on gravel, heart hammering so hard it made my ears ring. I climbed in, slammed the door, and locked it without thinking. The interior lights came on, too bright. I twisted the key and the engine roared to life. Air pressure alarms screamed. I didn't care. I shoved it into gear as soon as the gauges allowed and pulled back onto the highway. I drove fast. Faster than I should have. I kept my eyes on the mirrors, scanning the shoulder, the ramp, the edge of the field as it fell away behind me. I half expected to see something running, waving, stumbling into the road. There was nothing. Just darkness and empty pavement. As the miles passed, my breathing slowed, but my mind didn't. I replayed what I had seen, trying to find holes. Trying to explain it without letting fear take over. I told myself it had been a person. Someone standing in the field for some reason I didn't understand. Maybe a farmer checking damage. Maybe someone messing around. When they saw my lights go off, maybe they crouched down. Maybe they walked away while I wasn't looking. That explanation didn't sit right. Cut cornfields are loud. Dry stalks snap underfoot. I hadn't heard anything. And the distance felt wrong. The figure had been far enough that I should have seen movement if it left. I drove until I found light. A Love's came up 40 minutes later, glowing like a small city. Rows of parked trucks, headlights, movement, people. I pulled in, found a spot near the building and shut down. Only then did my hands start shaking again. I sat there for a long time, engine ticking, watching other drivers come and go. Eventually, I forced myself to get out and walk inside. I didn't look toward any fields. I didn't want to see open ground. I slept there, but it wasn't good sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shape standing still under the moon. The next afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I checked the map. That ramp wasn't far from a small access road that cut through the farmland. Public land bordered part of the field. During harvest season, locals used it for all kinds of things. Hunting, spotting deer, drinking. I did some digging later, asked around without giving details. A week after the incident, I got my answer. A driver I knew mentioned a guy who had been arrested near that exit. Middle-aged. Lived nearby. Known for harassing drivers. He would stand in fields at night wearing old work clothes, sometimes holding sticks or poles, just to mess with people parked on ramps. He liked the reaction. When headlights went off, he would drop flat and crawl away through the rows, using the ditch to stay hidden. Cops caught him after someone reported a person trying to approach a cab on foot. The explanation fit too well. The posture, the stillness, the way the figure vanished without a sound. Crawling through cut corn would be noisy if you rushed, but slow and careful, staying low, using the ditch. It could be done quietly, especially if the person had done it before. Knowing that didn't make me feel better. It made it worse. I realized how exposed I had been. Alone. Half asleep. Pants down in the dark. One wrong decision away from something going very bad. Not because of anything unreal or impossible, but because of another human being choosing to act strange and threatening for their own reasons. I finished that run and many more after it. I still drive nights. I still hit my 10 hours when I have to. But I do not stop on ramps anymore. Not ever. I will push to the next lot, the next rest area, the next stretch of light and noise, even if it costs me time or a clean log. Every so often when the moon is full and I pass a dark field, I think about that figure standing still in the corn. Not as something unknown, but as something far more unsettling. Just a person choosing to be there, watching trucks slow down, waiting for someone to let their guard down. I have driven trucks most of my life, and the road has always felt honest to me. It shows you what a place is before people dress it up with stories. In the 80s and early 90s, I hauled freight across East Africa. Long routes that crossed borders that were lines on paper more than anything else. I knew the smell of diesel-soaked dirt, the way heat sat on the cab like a hand, the rhythm of gears and gravel. I believed that if I kept my head down, kept moving, and treated the road with respect, it would let me pass. That belief carried me through deserts, border delays, and nights parked alone with only insects and wind for company. It did not prepare me for Rwanda. The weeks leading up to that trip felt tense in a way I could not name at the time. There were rumors everywhere. Drivers talked at way stations and fuel stops about trouble, about men with guns setting up roadblocks that were not official, about papers being checked longer than usual. I listened and filed it away the way drivers do. You hear a lot of talk on the road. Most of it never touches you. Rwanda itself was green and steep, hills folded into each other, mist hanging low in the mornings. It looked peaceful from the cab. Farms climbed the slopes. Children walked along the roadside with bundles on their heads. I stayed focused on the road, the weight of my load, the distance to the next border. I did not linger. I did not take pictures. I wanted to be through. The checkpoint came in the late afternoon. It was not marked like an official crossing. No proper signs. Just a bend in the road where vehicles slowed because men stood there with rifles. Oil drums and wooden barriers forced traffic into a single lane. I remember noticing how quiet it felt. No birds, no casual movement. Just stillness and watchful eyes. I eased the truck forward and cut the engine when waved to stop. I held out my papers. I expected the usual delay, the board inspection, maybe a small payment. Instead, hands grabbed the door and pulled it open. A rifle barrel pressed into my chest. I was pulled down from the cab hard enough that my feet tangled, and I nearly fell. Everything after that happened fast and slow at the same time. Hands on my arms. Shouting I could not understand. My papers were taken and not returned. I tried to point to my truck, to the plates, to anything that showed I was not from there. No one looked at what I pointed at. Faces were tight with something already decided. They pushed me away from the road, past trees, to a clearing where a wire cage stood. It was crude and low, made from fencing tied to posts. Inside were men packed together, sitting and standing because there was not room to lie down. Their clothes were dusty. Their faces were drawn. When they saw me, some shifted to make space. I was shoved inside and the gate was tied shut behind me. That was when I understood that my face had decided my fate. I looked like men they were hunting. It did not matter that I was a foreign driver passing through. In that moment I belonged to a category, and that was enough. The cage smelled of sweat and fear. The ground was bare earth worn smooth by feet. There was no shelter from the sun during the day or the cold at night. We were given little water and no food that first evening. Time lost its shape almost immediately. Without a watch or light, the day faded into night without warning. When darkness came, men with guns returned. They unlocked the gate and pointed, selecting people without speaking. 5 men were pulled out. The rest of us were forced to watch. I will not describe what happened in detail. I do not need to. The sounds and movements told the story clearly enough. When it was over, the ground outside the cage was marked in a way that could not be mistaken. After that, silence fell heavy and complete. No one spoke. Some men stared at the ground. Some rocked slowly. I stood pressed against the wire, my hands gripping it until my fingers hurt. I did not sleep. The second day passed in a blur of heat and thirst. My mind kept trying to find logic, some rule I could follow to get out. I went over my route, my documents, every decision that had brought me there. None of it mattered. I was trapped by perception, by a line drawn across faces. That night it happened again. 5 more men taken. 5 more lives ended while the rest of us watched, helpless and exposed. I felt myself shrinking inside, becoming smaller, trying not to be noticed. Fear settled into my body like a weight. My heart beat so hard I thought it would give me away. I began to understand that this was not random violence. It was systematic. The cage was not temporary. It was a holding place for people already judged. I could see it in the guards' posture, in the routine of it. They knew exactly what they were doing. The third day I woke with a dry mouth and aching muscles. My clothes were stiff with sweat and dirt. Flies gathered around the cage. The men inside looked older than they had days before. Hope drains fast when there is nowhere to direct it. That evening, as the light faded, I noticed a man standing near the cage who had not been there before. He wore the same uniform as the others but moved differently. He watched us longer. His eyes lingered on faces rather than sliding past them. When he looked at me, something flickered across his expression. Recognition, or at least curiosity. Later, when the guards returned, the selection began again. I braced myself, certain this was the night I would be chosen. Instead, my name was not among the gestures and pointed fingers. I remained in the cage as others were taken. The relief was sharp and immediate, followed by shame for feeling it. After it was over, the man I had noticed earlier came closer to the cage. He did not speak loudly. He did not draw attention. He looked at my face, then at my clothes, then at my hands. I realized he was trying to place me. He asked me something quietly. I did not understand the words at first, but the sound pattern caught my ear. Swahili, broken and accented, but Swahili all the same. I answered with the few words I could manage, my voice rough from disuse. His eyes widened slightly. He asked again, more clearly this time. I told him where I was from, that I was a driver passing through, that I was not Rwandan. He listened without interrupting. I pulled my identification from where it had been stuffed back into my pocket earlier. I held it up to the wire so he could see. He took it and studied it in the fading light, turning it over, checking the photo against my face. For a long moment he said nothing. Around us the camp was quiet. The guards relaxed after their work. Finally he nodded once and handed the ID back through the wire. He looked around, then told me to wait. That wait was worse than the nights before. Every sound made me tense. I imagined him changing his mind, or being seen, or deciding it was not worth the risk. I stayed pressed against the wire, eyes fixed on the place where he had stood. Time passed. Then he returned with another man. They unlocked the cage and motioned for me to come out. My legs felt weak as I stepped into the open. I expected a trick, a test. Instead they led me away from the clearing, back toward the road. We walked without speaking. The sounds of insects grew louder as we left the camp. My truck came into view, exactly where I had left it, sitting heavy and solid on the roadside. Seeing it felt unreal, like spotting a memory made solid. The man who had spoken to me handed me my keys. He pointed to the cab and then down the road, a clear direction to leave and not stop. I climbed into the truck with shaking hands and started the engine. The sound of it was the most comforting thing I have ever heard. I did not look back as I pulled away. I did not stop until I crossed the border and saw uniforms I recognized. Even then I did not slow more than necessary. My body stayed tight for hours, waiting for something to happen. I slept in the cab that night, parked among other trucks, the noise of engines and voices grounding me in reality. When morning came, the world looked the same as it always had, but I was not the same person who had entered Rwanda days before. I finished that route and then took time off. The road did not feel honest anymore. It felt fragile, like a thin line stretched over deep water. I thought often about the men in the cage, about the randomness of survival, about how close I had come to being one of the 5 taken each night. What haunts me most is not the violence itself, but the quiet routine of it. How easily it fit into the rhythm of a day. How ordinary it felt to the people carrying it out. There were no monsters there, just men making choices inside a system that rewarded them for it. I still drive sometimes, though not like before. Every checkpoint makes my chest tighten. Every glance from a uniformed man carries weight. I know now that the road does not care who you are. It will carry you into places where identity can become a death sentence, And the only thing that might save you is a shared word in the dark and a stranger willing to listen. I was lucky. I know that in a way that sits heavy in my stomach. I was given back my keys and my life while others were left behind. That knowledge rides with me every mile, a reminder that the scariest things on the road are not accidents or breakdowns, but moments when the world decides you belong somewhere you never chose. I drove nights on that run so often that the road felt like a narrow room I lived inside. Edinburgh to London, down through the dark spine of the country, long straight stretches broken by services, bridges, and the steady hum of tires. The cab was my world. The dash lights stayed low, the radio stayed quiet. I liked the silence because it kept me alert. You notice small things when there is nothing else competing for your attention. Changes in engine note. Wind shifts. The way other drivers behave when they are tired or rushing or scared. That night was clear and cold. The motorway was busy but smooth. The kind of steady flow where everyone sits in their lane and time stretches. I had been driving for hours without incident. My body was settled into the rhythm. Hands light on the wheel. Eyes moving between mirrors, road mirrors again. When I glanced to my right, I expected to see nothing memorable. Just another car keeping pace or dropping back. Instead I saw her. The car was level with my cab for a few seconds. A small saloon, color dark enough to disappear in the night. She sat in the passenger seat. Her hair was pulled back tight into a bun that made her face look exposed, almost strained. It reminded me of a school headmistress style, severe and practical, but her face did not match it. Her eyes were wide and fixed straight at me. Not a glance, not curiosity. A stare full of fear, the kind you see when someone has already tried everything else. I felt a cold pull in my stomach. Drivers look at each other all the time. Most of the time it means nothing. This was different. Her mouth was slightly open. Her face was pale under the motorway lights. She did not look at the driver. She did not move at all. It felt like she was bracing herself. Before I could decide what to do, the car slowed and took the next exit. I watched the tail lights peel away, then vanish. My hands tightened on the wheel. The motorway swallowed me again. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was carsick. Maybe an argument. Maybe I had imagined the intensity. Long hours do strange things to perception. Still, I checked my mirrors more than usual. My shoulders stayed tight. Every time a car pulled alongside, my chest jumped. About half an hour later, when the road had settled again, another car came up on my right. Different shape, different color, different driver. My brain registered all that in a rush, then stalled when I saw the passenger. Same woman. Same hair pulled back hard. Same fixed stare. Same terror frozen on her face. For a moment my thoughts went blank. The odds made no sense. My pulse thudded in my ears. I felt heat climb up my neck. I kept the truck steady, eyes flicking between her and the road. She did not move. She did not blink much. She looked directly at me as if I was the only solid thing she could see. The car did not linger. It pulled away and exited, just like the first one. I watched it go, my mouth dry. I told myself again that there had to be a reasonable explanation. Car sharing. A coincidence stretched thin by fatigue. Still, the feeling did not leave. It settled into my chest and stayed there, heavy and uncomfortable. I decided that if it happened again, I would stop. Better to look foolish than ignore something real. I scanned signs for the next services. I planned where I would pull in, how I would explain it without sounding unhinged. Even if nothing came of it, it would sit better with me than driving on and pretending I had not seen her. The motorway rolled on. Time stretched. Traffic thinned and thickened again. I ate a sandwich without tasting it. Every car that drew level made my heart jump, then sink. Hours passed. I was far south by then, the familiar approach toward London, the air heavier, the traffic more impatient even at night. My body was tired but alert, nerves wound tight. When another car eased up beside me, I felt that now familiar drop in my stomach. She was there again. Same hair, same seat. Her face looked worse this time. The fear had tipped into something sharper. Her mouth was open wide now, her jaw strained. Her eyes were locked on me with desperate intensity. I could see the muscles in her neck tight, the tendons standing out. She looked like she was screaming, though I could not hear anything through glass and speed. That was enough. I slowed and pulled into the next lay-bay, hands shaking as I signaled. The car stayed with me for a moment, then accelerated and vanished into the dark. I parked, shut down, and sat there breathing hard, the engine ticking as it cooled. The night felt too quiet. My cab felt suddenly small. I called the police and reported exactly what I had seen. I stuck to facts. Same woman, multiple cars, different locations. Clear fear, no plates, no clear details beyond that. I expected confusion. What I got was calm efficiency. The operator told me they had already received other calls. 3 of them. Same description. Same stretch of road. Same time frame. That did not make me feel better. They took my details and told me to continue when I felt able. There was nothing else for me to do. I sat there for a while, then pulled back onto the motorway, nerves buzzing, eyes working overtime. I did not see her again that night. I kept an eye on the news for weeks after. Nothing came up. No missing person appeals that matched her face. No reports that lined up cleanly with what I had seen. Life moved on, as it always does. The run stayed the same. The roads stayed the same. Years later, with distance and thought, I tried to make sense of it in a way that did not rely on chance alone. The only explanation that fits the pattern is organized coercion. A woman being moved between vehicles to avoid detection. Different drivers, same passenger. The repeated appearances timed to long-haul traffic where drivers are less likely to stop or intervene. Her staring was not random. It was deliberate. She was looking for someone who would notice, someone who would remember, someone with enough time and sense to call it in. The fact that others called supports that. She was trying to be seen. She used the only tool she had. Her face, her fear. She chose moments when vehicles ran side by side, when eye contact was possible, when there was just enough time to register that something was wrong before she was taken away again. Why she disappeared before details could be taken makes sense too. The drivers knew the risk. They did not linger. They used exits and merges to break contact. They kept moving. The anticlimax is part of what makes it unsettling. There was no closure, no confirmation, just the knowledge that something bad was likely happening in plain sight, and that the system caught fragments of it but not the whole. I did what I could. Others did too. Whether it helped, I will never know. What stays with me is her face. Not the fear alone, but the intent behind it. She was not panicking blindly. She was reaching out with precision. That is what still tightens my chest when I think about it. On a road I knew better than my own street, in a job built on routine and predictability, something briefly cracked the surface and showed how thin that comfort really is. I had been running that stretch of eastern Washington long enough that it felt familiar in a way most people would never understand. Not familiar like a neighborhood or a town, but familiar like a scar you forget about until it aches. Long state roads cutting through open land, nothing but wheat stubble, low hills, irrigation rigs sitting still like dead insects. No rest areas, no towns, just distance. You learned where you could safely pull off without blocking farm access or ending up sunk in soft ground. Every 40 miles, or so there were these wide dirt clearings, scraped flat by years of trucks doing the same thing I was doing now. They were unofficial, but everybody knew them. It was late enough that my eyes burned when I blinked. The road had been empty for hours. No headlights coming at me, no taillights ahead. Just the hum of tires and the steady pull of the engine. The wind was strong out there, pushing at the side of the truck, making the mirrors shake. I rolled into one of those dirt areas, slowed carefully, and eased the rig to a stop well off the road. Dust hung in the air behind me, drifting through my lights before settling back into the dark. I shut down, listened to the engine tick as it cooled, then pulled the curtains around the windshield. The cab went black except for the dim glow of my phone. I kicked off my boots, stretched out in the sleeper, and leaned back against the mattress with my shoulders sore and my neck tight. Outside, the wind moved across the open ground, steady and hollow sounding, like water running through a pipe. I put something on my phone, nothing special, just noise to keep my mind from wandering. After a while my breathing slowed. My body started to sink into that place between awake and asleep, where the road still feels like it is moving under you. That was when I heard the first sound. It was sharp and metallic, not loud but clear, a click and a tug like someone testing the driver's side door handle. My eyes opened fast. I froze without thinking, phone still in my hand. The sound came again, slower this time. The handle moving, stopping, then moving again. There had been no other vehicles. I was sure of that. The road had been dead quiet when I pulled in, and it stayed quiet after. I swung my legs off the mattress and knelt, careful not to make noise. I slid 2 fingers under the edge of the front curtain and lifted it just enough to see a thin strip of the window. Outside was black. No headlights. No silhouettes. Just the faint reflection of my own movement in the glass. Before I could settle my thoughts, I heard the passenger side handle move. That was worse. It meant whoever it was moving around the truck. Not just passing by. Not just confused. I shifted my weight and peered through a gap on that side, craning my neck. The mirror showed nothing but darkness and a hint of stars. The ground beyond was invisible. My pulse was loud in my ears. I reached forward and started the truck. The engine came to life with a deep vibration that ran through the cab and into my chest. I flipped on the headlights and marker lights, flooding the dirt lot with white and amber. I still did not open the curtains fully. I looked through small gaps, scanning the ground near the doors, the space in front of the hood, the edges of the clearing. There was nothing there, no person, no vehicle, no movement. The wind pushed against the cab, rocking it slightly. Dust blew past the lights in low sheets. I sat there breathing, trying to slow myself down. I told myself it could have been the wind. The handles were old. Pressure changes could make things move. I had heard stranger noises in trucks before. I closed the front curtains again, then pulled the sleeper curtains tight behind me, sealing myself in the back like that would help. I lay down and stared at the dark fabric inches from my face. My phone screen had dimmed. I turned it off and set it down. I focused on the sound of the wind and the faint hiss from the air system as the suspension adjusted itself. Several minutes passed. Maybe more. Time stretched in a way it only does when you are scared and still. Then I heard something scrape above me. It was a dry, dragging sound, followed by a dull pop. I knew that sound. It was someone trying to mess with the vents on the sleeper roof. Not climbing all the way up, but reaching, pulling, testing. My chest tightened. Before I could react, the door handles started clicking again, faster now on both sides. The cab shifted as weight pressed against it. The truck rocked harder, not like wind, but uneven, like feet stepping on the fuel tank and the side steps. Fingers tapped against the windows, light but deliberate, moving from glass to metal and back again. The air suspension hissed loud as the weight changed. I hit the alarm button near the bunk, hoping the sudden noise would scare whoever it was awake. The horn blasted into the night, sharp and echoing across the empty land. Instead of stopping, everything got louder. The handles rattled. The tapping increased, scattered across the cab and sleeper walls. The truck rocked more as if someone was climbing, then shifting position. I stayed frozen, one hand clenched into the mattress, the other hovering uselessly near the wall. My thoughts ran in circles, fast and useless. I had nowhere to go. If I opened a curtain, I risked showing myself. If I opened a door, I would be trapped halfway. Then, as abruptly as it started, it stopped. The handles went still. The tapping vanished. The truck settled back onto its suspension with a soft sigh of air. The only sound left was the wind and my own breathing, ragged and shallow. I stayed exactly where I was. My body shook in small waves I could not control. Seconds dragged into minutes. I listened for footsteps, voices, anything. There was nothing. Eventually I heard an engine in the distance. Headlights swept across the curtains as another truck passed on the road, never slowing, never turning in. The sound faded away. I did not sleep after that. I stayed awake until the sky lightened from black to dark blue, then to gray. When the sun finally came up, I opened the curtains and stepped down onto the dirt. There were no footprints. The wind had smoothed the ground flat overnight. No marks on the steps. No damage to the doors or vents. Everything looked normal. Until I looked at the windows. Every window on the cab and sleeper was covered in faint, greasy handprints. Small ones. Too small to belong to an adult. The fingers were short and wide, the palms rounded. They overlapped each other in places, smeared and repeated, like someone had pressed them again and again. Some were high, some low, some sideways, as if made from different angles. In the morning light they stood out clearly. They looked exactly like the handprints my nephew used to leave on glass when he was a toddler, after eating, after licking his hands, leaving that cloudy film behind. I stood there a long time staring at them. The fear slowly drained away, replaced by something colder and heavier. That area had not been empty. It only looked that way. Those dirt clearings were known for another reason truckers did not talk about much. Seasonal workers moved through that land all the time, following harvests, living rough, staying out of sight. Families, not just men. When the wind blew hard at night, sound carried strangely. Engines could be heard for miles, drawing attention. Someone had seen my truck pull in. Someone with children. Curious children who had never been close to a semi before. They had come out quietly, while the adults stayed back, watching. The kids had climbed, touched, explored, not understanding the danger or the fear they were causing. When I hit the horn, the adults had panicked, grabbed them, and vanished back into the dark, leaving no trace by morning. I wiped the windows clean before I left. The smell of dust and oil stayed on my hands for the rest of the day. I finished the route, but I never slept in those clearings again. I stopped only in places with light, with cameras, with other trucks nearby. The open land still looks empty when you drive through it, but I know better now. I am not a truck driver, but for 4 years my job has put me on the road every day and night, sometimes for more hours than I like to admit. Driving became routine in the way breathing does. You stop thinking about it until something goes wrong. That night started as routine, even though I knew better. I had already worked 14 hours by the time I loaded my tools back into the vehicle in Clarksdale. My body felt hollowed out from the heat and the long day, but my head still felt sharp enough. I ate dinner, drank coffee, and told myself I would be home before the worst of the weather moved in. The Delta at night is a strange place even in calm conditions. It is flat in a way that feels unnatural, like the land has been pressed down with a hand. 2-lane highways cut through fields that stretch beyond the reach of headlights. There are no hills to break the wind, no trees close enough to feel comforting, no buildings to anchor your sense of distance. The darkness does not feel empty. It feels wide and exposed. When the sky is clear, stars sit low and bright. When storms roll in, there is nowhere for them to hide. As I pulled out of Clarksdale, the wind was already picking up. The radio crackled with warnings about high winds and tornado threats scattered across the Delta. I called my wife before I lost signal, told her the weather was turning bad, and promised to check in once I reached a safer area. I did not say much else. I did not want to worry her. I had driven through storms before. I told myself this would be no different. 30 miles out, the rain started coming in sideways. The wind pushed the vehicle enough that I had to grip the wheel harder, just to keep centered. The road reflected the headlights back at me, turning every puddle into a smear of white glare. There were no taillights ahead of me and none behind. It felt like I was the only thing moving in a world that had decided to shut down for the night. Then the hail started. It came without warning, small hard pieces striking the roof and hood in rapid bursts. The sound was sharp and loud, like handfuls of gravel thrown as hard as possible. In Mississippi in July, hail is not normal weather. Hail means violent storms. Hail means rotation. My stomach tightened as instinct kicked in. I slowed and pulled off onto the narrow shoulder, far from any lights or shelter. The engine idled while the wind rocked the vehicle. I needed to know where the storm was. If a tornado was forming, I needed time to react. I rolled down the passenger window just enough to lean out and raised my flashlight. It was a powerful tool I used for work, capable of cutting through darkness farther than headlights ever could. The beam sliced across the fields, illuminating rain and low clouds. It felt like shining a light into an ocean. There was nothing solid to land on. No funnel. No structure. Just rain driven hard by wind. I pulled back inside and turned to check the driver's side. The movement was automatic. The same way you glance at a mirror without thinking. My eyes met something that did not belong there. A face was pressed flat against the glass. It filled the window, pale and distorted by the curve of the glass. The skin looked almost colorless in the flashlight spill and dashboard glow. The eyes were deep set, staring straight at me without blinking. The grin was wide and unnatural, stretched from one corner of the mouth to the other. Teeth crowded together, uneven and sharp looking in the dim light. The expression was not angry. It was not surprised. It was deliberate, as if the person had leaned in slowly and waited for me to look. My body reacted before my mind could. A sound tore out of my chest without permission. My hands jerked the wheel as I slammed the vehicle into drive. The tires spun on wet gravel, then caught. The engine roared as I pulled back onto the road. In the side mirror there was nothing. No figure running away. No shadow retreating into the field. Just rain and darkness swallowing the shoulder. I drove far faster than I should have, heart pounding hard enough to feel painful. My breathing was shallow and quick. I kept checking the mirrors, expecting to see someone chasing after me or a vehicle with lights off following close behind. There was nothing. The road stayed empty. The hail tapered off as suddenly as it had started, replaced by heavy rain and wind. I did not stop until I reached the first place that felt remotely safe, a small gas station on the edge of a town with lights on and cars parked outside. I sat there with the engine running longer than necessary, letting my pulse slow. I called my wife and told her I had made it out of the worst of the weather. I did not mention the hail or the man at the window. I did not trust my own voice to stay steady if I did. When I finally shut the vehicle off, my hands were still shaking. I remembered the cameras. Every company vehicle is equipped with front and rear cameras that record constantly. They are there for accidents and insurance claims, but in that moment they felt like a lifeline to reality. I pulled the SD card and went inside, sat at a small table with harsh fluorescent lighting, and scrolled through the footage. The video showed me pulling over. It showed rain streaking across the windshield and hail bouncing in the headlights. It showed me leaning toward the passenger side, flashlight beam flashing across the darkness. It showed me turning back toward the wheel. Then it showed the vehicle lurching forward and pulling back onto the road. There was nothing on the driver's side window. No face. No shadow. No movement approaching from either side. The rear camera showed an empty shoulder the entire time. The front camera showed nothing but rain and road. I watched the clip again and again, slowing it down frame by frame. I checked timestamps, angles, reflections. I checked for glare from my own interior lights. There was nothing that could explain what I had seen. The cameras had not failed. They had captured everything they were supposed to. I drove the rest of the way home without stopping again. The rain followed me most of the way, but the wind calmed as I moved out of the delta. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the familiar shape of my house felt unreal, like something I was not supposed to be seeing yet. I sat in the dark with the engine off, listening to the ticking of hot metal cooling. In the days that followed, I replayed the moment in my head more times than I could count. I tried to rationalize it. Fatigue, even when you do not feel sleepy, can play tricks on perception. Stress sharpens imagination. A flash of lightning could have reflected my own face back at me, distorted by the glass and the angle. A person could have been out there. Some local pulled over in the storm, approaching to ask for help, only to step away when I screamed and drove off. The Delta has long stretches of nothing, but nothing does not mean no one. The more I thought about it, the more one explanation began to settle. Rural highways attract people who do not want to be seen. People who drift. People who live on the edges of towns and fields. A storm like that would have driven most folks inside, but not everyone. Someone could have been walking along the road, soaked and desperate, drawn to the only vehicle in sight. They could have leaned in too close without thinking, smiling in a way meant to reassure, but twisted by circumstance and light into something terrifying. When I reacted, they could have stepped back into the darkness, invisible the moment the vehicle moved. The cameras would not have caught them if they stayed close to the door, outside the field of view. The rain and darkness would have swallowed any trace of them the second I drove away. The explanation fit, even if it did not bring comfort. I still drive for work, I still cover long distances. But I plan my routes differently now. I avoid the Delta at night unless there is no other option. When storms roll in, I find shelter early. I do not pull over on empty shoulders anymore. That night taught me that isolation carries its own risks, ones that cameras and experience do not always protect you from. Some places leave you too exposed, and some moments remind you how thin the barrier is between routine and something that stays with you long after the road ends. I have been driving long enough that nothing surprises me the way it used to. When you live on the road, you see what other people only hear about on the evening news. Wrecks that turn steel into ribbons. People walking the shoulder with eyes burned hollow by drugs. Cars abandoned with doors open and no one around. Most of it has a reason if you look long enough. Still, some nights stay with you, because they never settle into a clean explanation. Years ago, before they shut it down, there was a small rest area on US 52 where it crossed ND 30 near Sikeston. It was nothing special. A low concrete building, a few picnic tables, gravel parking, and open land stretching away in every direction. Flat fields, wind, sky that felt too big at night. I had stopped there countless times. It was a place you used without thinking. That night had been quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when the wind drops and the highway noise fades into a low hum. I went inside, used the restroom, washed my hands, and stepped back out. The air felt cool and dry. I remember the smell of cut grass and dust. My truck sat where I left it, engine ticking as it cooled. A few cars were scattered around the lot. Nothing stood out. I climbed into the cab, fired the engine, and eased forward. As I started to pull out, I caught movement to my right. One of the cars had its door open. At first I thought someone had dropped something. Then the door opened wider, and the angle lined up just right with my headlights. The man inside was naked. No clothes at all. Not half-dressed. Not changing. Bare skin in the harsh white light. He stepped out of the car and stood there like he belonged there, like this was normal. He did not rush. He did not hide. He walked slowly around his car, hands at his sides, looking toward the road and the rest area as if he was waiting for something. There was no expression I could read from that distance, no obvious threat, just a calm that made it worse. I did not see any sign of a weapon. I did not see anyone else with him. My first thought was drugs. My second was that he wanted attention. Neither option made me interested in staying. I did not stop. I did not watch. I kept rolling, turned onto the highway, and brought the truck up to speed. I checked my mirror once and then forced myself not to look again. The rest area fell away behind me, swallowed by darkness. I told myself it was simple. People do strange things when they are high or unwell. A rest area is public space. Anyone can end up there. Still, the image stuck. The way he moved without hurry. The way he did not seem embarrassed or afraid. It stayed with me longer than it should have. That was not the night that really got under my skin, though. That came later, crossing Kansas on I-70, heading west. Kansas at night can wear on you. Long straight stretches, few towns. The road feels endless. Your headlights carve a tunnel through the dark, and everything outside that tunnel might as well not exist. I had settled into a steady pace. Traffic was light. The sky was clear, stars sharp and cold. Somewhere after midnight, I noticed a motorhome pass me. It was old and beat up, paint faded, edges rusted. As it came alongside, I glanced over out of habit. There were several people inside. They sat close to the windows, faces pale in the dim interior light. They leaned forward, noses near the glass, eyes fixed on my cab. Not a quick look, not curiosity. They watched like they were studying me. The motorhome eased ahead and moved back into the right lane. I let it go. A few miles later, I passed them again. I did not think much of it. Maybe they slowed down. Maybe I sped up. That happens. Then they passed me again. Same motorhome. Same worn sides. Same cluster of faces pressed to the windows. Same intent stare. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I watched my mirrors as they moved ahead, waiting to see where they would pull off. They did not. I kept going. The road stayed empty. No exits. No rest areas. Just fields and the black line of the horizon. After a while, I passed them again. I remember checking my speed, checking the clock, trying to account for it. I knew this stretch well. There was nowhere they could have stopped without me seeing them. They came by a fourth time. Each pass looked the same. The people inside never waved, never looked away. Their faces were thin, hair long and unkempt. Beards, blank expressions. They reminded me of old photos from the 70s, cult members, drifters. People who had stepped away from the world and never came back. By the fifth pass, my hands were tight on the wheel. I kept scanning ahead for lights, exits, anything that would explain it. The rational part of my mind ran through options. Different motorhome, same model, fatigue, time distortion. Speed changes I did not notice. None of it fit cleanly. There were no rest areas. No towns close enough. I never saw them parked. I never saw them turn off. They just appeared from behind, slid past, and vanished ahead until I caught them again. I watched my mirrors constantly now. The dark felt thicker. The road noise seemed louder. Every reflective marker flashed like a warning. When I finally reached Lemon and pulled into the TA, I felt relief flood through me so hard it left me shaky. Lights. Other trucks. Normal sounds. I parked, shut down, and sat there for a long time before climbing down. Nothing followed me in. No motorhome rolled through the lot. I walked inside, got coffee, and stayed near people until my nerves settled. That night, I slept with the sleeper curtains open enough to see the lights. In the morning, with sunlight and distance, the story lost its teeth. Fatigue does strange things. Long nights mess with perception. Two similar vehicles can look the same in the dark. Speed changes you do not notice add up. I accepted that explanation because it was the only one that made sense. Over the years, I have also seen things cross the road late at night that I cannot name cleanly. Large shapes, tall, moving fast. They appear at the edge of the headlights and are gone before the mind can focus. Each time I slowed, scanned the ditches, checked for animals. I never saw anything after. No tracks. No eyes. No sound. Just the road stretching on. I am not claiming anything strange lives out there. I know what fatigue can do. When you have been awake too long, your brain fills gaps. Shadows stretch. Movement feels faster than it is. A deer at the wrong angle can look like something else for half a second. The key is that half second. It is enough to spike your heart and stay with you. Enough to make you question your senses even when you know better. Looking back now, I can line it all up. The naked man was likely high or unwell and chose a rest area because it felt safe or private to him. The motor home was either the same one changing speed, or different ones that looked alike in the dark. The figures on the road were animals or tricks of light, caught at the edge of tired eyes. None of it breaks the rules of the world. None of it requires anything beyond human behavior, bad decisions, and exhaustion. What makes it unsettling is how thin the line feels out there at night. How quickly a normal stop can turn uncomfortable. How easy it is for patterns to form when you are alone with your thoughts and miles to cover. I still drive. I still stop when I need to. I still trust my judgment. But I pay attention now. I rest when I am tired. I do not dismiss that feeling in my gut when something does not line up. The road does not need monsters to be unsettling. It only needs people, darkness, and a tired mind. I have driven trucks for most of my adult life, and long nights on empty highways give you time to think. When the road goes quiet and the radio fades into static, old stories surface. One of them has stayed with me since I was a kid, told and retold at family gatherings until it settled into my bones. It came from my grandfather, who spent his youth cutting timber in the forests of Washington and Oregon. Back when logging camps were rough and the roads were little more than dirt carved between trees. I think about that story often when I am hauling through the same region, surrounded by the same dark hills, even though decades have passed. My grandfather was not the type to embellish. He spoke plainly, worked hard, and laughed rarely. When he told that story, his tone never changed. No dramatic pauses, no raised voice. Just a careful recounting of something that stayed with him long after the saws were put away and the camps shut down. That made it worse, not better. He was young then, strong from swinging an axe all day, and bone-tired every night. He and 3 other men shared a rough routine. They worked long hours in the woods, then drove back toward their separate homes in a single car, saving fuel and time. This was rural country, miles from towns, with roads that twisted through dense timber and low hills. The drives often stretched late into the night and past midnight. They were used to it. Fatigue was part of the job. One night, or early morning as he always corrected himself, the exhaustion finally caught up to him. He and the other man in the back seat fell asleep without noticing. The front passenger stayed awake on purpose, keeping the driver alert. That was standard. Falling asleep at the wheel on those roads meant going off into trees or down a ravine. They had all seen wrecks. They knew the risk. The car kept moving through the darkness while my grandfather slept. The windows were cracked to keep the driver awake. Cold air flowed through the car, carrying the smell of damp earth and pine. The road was narrow, unlit, and uneven. Headlights cut a thin tunnel through the forest. Outside that beam was nothing but black. He said he woke up to violence. Not fear at first, just the sudden loss of forward motion. Tires screamed against dirt and gravel. The car lurched sideways and stopped hard. His body slammed forward against the seat in front of him. For a brief moment, he did not know where he was or why he was awake. That confusion lasted only seconds. The driver and the front passenger were frozen. Both were leaned forward, hands gripping the dash and steering wheel, faces washed white by the headlights. Their eyes were locked on something ahead. My grandfather followed their gaze. Something stood in the road. He described it as tall. That was the first thing he always said. Too tall for a man. Too wide in the shoulders and torso. It was standing upright, directly in the headlights, filling the lane. Its surface was dark and absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. No shine, no clear shape. Just mass. The car's headlights lit the lower part of it better than the top. The upper portion blended into the night sky and tree line. The edges were not sharp. The shape shifted slightly, like it was breathing or adjusting its balance. It was close enough that the headlights threw harsh shadows around it, making it look larger than it probably was. My grandfather said, "They all stared long enough for details to settle in. This was not a glimpse. This was not something that darted away. It stood there. The forest around it stayed silent. No movement in the trees. No wind. The road ahead was empty except for that shape. Fear came next. Not panic. Not screaming. Just the heavy kind that presses on your chest and makes your mouth dry. He said he felt it like a weight pushing him back into the seat. The driver reacted on instinct. He did not try to go forward. He did not honk. He did not wait. He threw the car into reverse, cut the wheel, and executed the fastest three-point turn my grandfather had ever seen. Gravel sprayed. The engine roared. The headlights swung wildly, briefly losing the shape, and then catching it again from a different angle. For that second look, it seemed wider. Its silhouette changed as the light hit it from the side. My grandfather said that was when his mind latched onto something solid, something that fit the world he understood. A bear, a large one, standing on its hind legs, possibly startled by the car, possibly trying to scare it off. In those woods, bears were common. Massive black bears could reach heights that looked unreal when upright. Headlights, shadows, and exhaustion could turn a known animal into something unrecognizable. The driver completed the turn and accelerated away without slowing. No one looked back. They took a different route, adding miles to the trip. The car stayed silent except for the engine, and the sound of breathing slowly returning to normal. Later, when they were calm enough to think clearly, they agreed on the explanation. A bear. It made sense. It fit the facts. It fit the location. It fit the time of night. Nothing else needed to be added. What lingered was not the image itself, but how wrong it felt in the moment. My grandfather always emphasized that. He knew bears. He had seen them before. This one had not moved like the others. It had not run. It had not dropped to all fours. It had not made noise. It had simply stood there, occupying the road as if it belonged there. Years passed. He left logging. He raised a family. He aged. The forests changed. Roads improved. But the story stayed the same every time he told it. He never added details. He never exaggerated. He never claimed it was anything other than a bear. He said the explanation was logical and final. Still, he told it at every gathering. Now, as a trucker, I understand why. Long before dawn, hauling freight through those same regions, I see how light can deceive. Headlights stretch shapes. Fatigue fills in gaps. Animals appear larger, closer, and stranger than they are. I have seen elk freeze in the road, towering and still. I have seen bears rise up when surprised. I have felt my heart pound while my mind scrambled for reason. I have also learned how isolated those roads can be. How silence amplifies every thought. How the forest feels closed in at night, pressing close to the pavement. When I drive there, I slow down without realizing it. I scan farther ahead. I remember my grandfather's calm voice, and the way his eyes looked distant when he spoke. That night did not change his life. It did not haunt his dreams. It did not send him searching for answers. It stayed with him because it was one of the few times the world slipped, just enough to remind him how small and vulnerable a man can be on a dark road. I believe his explanation. A bear makes sense. Biology and environment support it. There is nothing supernatural in a large animal reacting to sudden light and noise. Fear does not require mystery to be real. What makes the story endure is the moment before reason returned. That frozen pause in the headlights. The shared understanding between four exhausted men that something was wrong, even if they could not name it yet. Every time I drive through rural Washington or Oregon at night, I think of that shape standing still in the beam of old headlights. I know what it likely was. I accept it fully. And I still feel my hands tighten on the wheel. I was part of an off-road racing crew in Baja California, the kind of job that blurred the line between mechanic, navigator, and test driver. When you spend enough time down there, you stop thinking in terms of roads and start thinking in terms of terrain. Dirt, rock, washboard, sand, dry riverbeds. Trucks were tools, not vehicles. We drove them hard because we had to know where they failed. That meant long nights, isolated routes, and stretches of land where the desert swallowed sound and light. That night we were running south along the Sea of Cortez, heading toward Gonzaga. The road was barely a road. 4 hours of dirt, no lighting, no services, nothing but desert and water. The moon was low and thin. The sky was clear, full of stars, the kind you only see when there is no town glow anywhere on the horizon. The air smelled dry and salty at the same time. The truck vibrated constantly from the washboard, a deep, steady rattle that worked its way into your bones. We were not racing. We were moving at a careful pace, fast enough to keep control, slow enough to read the road. The headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness. Outside that tunnel was nothing. The desert felt endless, flat in places, rising suddenly into rock, and then dropping away toward the water. Every now and then the road bent closer to the shoreline, and you could sense the sea, even when you could not see it. I had done this route before. It was normal to see other vehicles late at night. Back then the nearest spring break town was still active. People drank all night and then blasted down that road to test suspensions and egos. No police, no checkpoints, just speed and darkness. It was stupid, but it was common. The first sign was light in the mirror. At first it looked distant, a faint shimmer that bounced with the terrain. I assumed it was someone else running late. Then it closed the gap fast, too fast. The light grew brighter, harsher, and then it split into multiple points. Roof-mounted lights, maybe a full bar. The kind used for racing or serious desert runs. They were aimed straight ahead, not dipped, not adjusted for traffic. They washed over the cab and erased depth from the road ahead. Everything turned flat and white. I tried to signal without stopping. I slowed slightly, moved right where the shoulder allowed, hoping the driver would pass. The road was narrow and uneven. Passing there was risky. The light stayed locked behind us, steady, aggressive. The distance did not change. The speed stayed high. The glare made it hard to judge the next curve. The road ahead dipped and twisted near the shoreline. I knew the bend. It was sharp and unforgiving. Past it, the ground dropped away toward the beach. There was no guardrail, just loose dirt and rocks sloping down to the sand and then water. The truck behind showed no sign of backing off. The lights stayed fixed, bright enough to throw shadows forward of us. The feeling in my chest tightened. This was how people died out there. One mistake, one blind moment, and there was nothing to stop you from leaving the road. I watched the terrain closely and waited for a spot. Near the curve there was a widened section, not a pull-out, just a place where the ground flattened enough to get clear of the main track without rolling. I took it. The tires slid slightly, gravel popping under the tread, suspension flexing as we left the road. We came to a stop angled away from the curve, engine idling low. The lights rushed past. The other vehicle did not slow. It did not swerve. It did not acknowledge us. It blasted straight into the curve at a speed that made my stomach drop. From where we sat, we had a clear view of the road edge and the slope beyond. I expected to see chaos. Headlights tumbling, dust, sparks. The sound of metal tearing. The sea below was black and calm, waiting. None of that happened. The lights did not dip. They did not scatter. They did not vanish downward. Instead, they continued straight, past the curve, beyond the road, onto the beach itself. The brightness washed across the sand and then moved forward, smooth and level, as if the ground had not ended. For a moment my brain tried to correct the image. I assumed there was a hidden track, some path I did not know. Then the lights reached the waterline. There was no splash, no reflection breaking. The light did not spread or distort. It kept moving forward. Then it rose. Not a jump, not a bounce. It rose cleanly, smoothly, pitching upward at an angle that had nothing to do with suspension or terrain. The lights tilted toward the sky and climbed. The separation between the light points stayed constant. There was no tumbling, no loss of control, just a steady ascent. Within seconds the lights were above the horizon, smaller now, climbing into the star field. Then they were gone. The desert went silent again. Only the low idle of our engine, and the faint sound of wind moving across sand. The glare was gone and the darkness returned, deep and complete. I sat there staring at the empty space where the lights had been. My breathing was shallow. My hands felt tight on the wheel. Time stretched. The moment replayed over and over, each detail sharp and unchanging. Eventually the truck next to me shifted slightly as my buddy moved. The simple fact that another person had seen the same thing anchored me. We did not speak. There was nothing to say that fit. After a while I eased the truck back onto the road. The headlights picked up the curve again. The drop toward the sea was exactly where it had always been. No tracks led onto the beach, no disturbed sand, no marks. It was as if nothing had passed at all. We continued toward Gonzaga at a slower pace. The road felt different now, smaller, less forgiving. Every shadow looked sharper. Every sound carried weight. The desert that had felt familiar earlier now felt vast and indifferent. I ran through explanations as we drove. Alcohol did not fit. No drunk driver pulled that maneuver. Speed alone could not explain the ascent. A jump required a ramp. There was none. Even if there had been, the trajectory had been wrong. Too controlled, too smooth. Military crossed my mind. Baja had its share of strange activity. Training exercises, unmarked equipment. But there were no restricted zones there. No reason for a test flight over an empty beach at that hour. And military hardware did not tail random trucks on dirt roads with blinding lights. Smugglers were more plausible. I had heard stories of ultralight aircraft used for moving drugs across borders. Simple frames, powerful engines, launched from remote areas. Some were transported on trailers, some were modified vehicles. The idea formed slowly, reluctantly. A truck with roof-mounted lights could have been towing, or carrying a powered glider or ultralight frame, lights mounted high for visibility during a launch run. The tailing behavior could have been coincidence, the driver pushing hard to reach a launch point before dawn. The curve near the shore might have marked a known launch area, a stretch of hard-packed sand used as a runway. If the vehicle had been towing a lightweight aircraft, the lights we saw might not have belonged to the truck itself. They could have been mounted on the aircraft frame. When the launch began, the aircraft would separate from the vehicle, climb, and disappear into the night. From our angle, from our distance, it could have looked like a single object leaving the ground. That explanation sat uneasily, but it held. It required no impossible physics. It fit the region, the time, the behavior. It explained the lack of tracks, the smooth ascent, the clean disappearance. It even explained the lack of reaction to our presence. People involved in that work did not slow for anyone. By the time we reached Gonzaga, the sky was starting to lighten at the edge of the horizon. The town was quiet, almost empty. We parked, shut down the engine, and stepped out into the cool air. The smell of the sea was stronger there. The world felt solid again. We never talked about it with anyone else. There was no point. The story sounded wrong even to me when I turned it over in my head. People would fill in gaps with things that did not belong. Fear. Fantasy. None of that matched what I felt. What stayed with me was not terror but unease. The sense of brushing against something that operated by different rules, not supernatural, just hidden. A reminder that in places like that, far from oversight and routine, other systems moved quietly through the dark. Things happened without witnesses, without records, without explanation offered or owed. Years later, when I hear about drug flights launched from remote beaches, or see grainy footage of homemade aircraft lifting off from sand, I think back to that night. The angle of the climb, the steadiness, the way the lights held their shape as they rose. It fits now. Not comfortably, but enough. The desert kept its secret. We drove through it, saw a piece of something not meant for us, and then left. The road did not change. The sea did not change. Only my understanding of how empty that place really was changed.